Labour's migration policies are already backfiring spectacularly, and the evidence is piling up faster than Keir Starmer can handle. Just days after Labour officially repealed key Tory-era protections on illegal migration, the Channel crossings have surged again. Today alone, 82 illegal migrants arrived on British shores, escorted by none other than the UK's own border force. And it's not stopping there. Yesterday, another 47 migrants made the journey from France in just one boat. This is the direct result of Labour's reckless decision to dismantle security provisions that were actually working. The party that once claimed it would bring order to the migration crisis has done the exact opposite. It has thrown open the doors and invited in chaos, and the reaction has been explosive. Suella Braverman, a woman who knows exactly what it takes to enforce a secure border, has gone scorched earth on Labour's so-called border security bill. She isn't mincing her words, calling it a disgrace, an insult to the British people, and an outright betrayal of the security measures the previous government had painstakingly put in place. But don't just take our word for it. The numbers speak for themselves. The UK's population is already set to skyrocket to 72.5 million by 2032, with a predicted influx of almost 5 million migrants. The question is, how much more can Britain take?
There's been some breaking news, hasn't there, from the ONS about population projections for the next 10 years?
Yes, there has. The ONS has put out in the last few minutes. The population of Britain was 67.6 million mid-2022. That is projected to go up to 72.5 million by mid-2032. So that's a rise of just under 5 million people projected in the next 10 years. And given that the government has made all these pledges about getting Britain building, including, 1.5 million new homes, given that we're expecting 500,000 additional people per year, it's very hard to see how they can even sort of keep still with the needs that huge population rise is going to bring.
Is a lot of that rise in population down to migration? People coming in?
Yes, the ONS are saying that this will be driven almost exclusively by net migration. Now, we know that net migration stood at, about 750,000 over the last year or two. Now, that's projected to come down. But even so, from 2022 to 2032, 500,000 per year on average. That's very, very high indeed. Bear in mind, of course, that when we had that Brexit vote, that one of the factors for the Brexit vote was getting control of migration. It was then standing at about 1/3 a year. And when Boris Johnson came in back in 2019, it was about 250,000. The Conservatives pledged to get that down. But look at where we are now.
And this is just the beginning. Border Force images obtained by GB News show the vessel Hurricane packed with people, calmly sailing into Dover like it's just another day at the office. But this isn't just another day. This is a monumental failure, and it's unfolding right before our eyes. Labour's new laws don't just let illegal migrants stay in the UK, they create a clear pathway to citizenship. Think about that for a moment. Under these new rules, people who arrive illegally can eventually become British citizens. That's not border security. That's a golden invitation for smugglers to ramp up their operations, knowing that Britain is now more welcoming to illegal arrivals than ever before. Even as the Home Office scrambles to do damage control, their excuses are falling apart. Their statement insists that they are strengthening cross-system operational efforts and tightening border security. But how can they make these claims when the Illegal Migration Act, the very legislation designed to crack down on crossings, hasn't even been enforced? They admit it. The Home Office itself states that the provisions from the Nationality and Borders Act 2022 are not being implemented under this government's policy. In other words, Labour has no intention of stopping the boats. Their entire approach to migration is a sham, and the British public is being taken for fools. And let's be clear, this isn't just about the numbers today. This is about what happens next. If 82 people can make it across in a single day, just days after these new policies were introduced, what's going to happen in a month, in 6 months, in a year? But as Labour's migration nightmare spirals out of control, it turns out their problems don't stop at the border. Up in Scotland, the party is facing a collapse collapse of historic proportions. A new poll from Find Out Now has sent shockwaves through Holyrood, showing that Labour's brief resurgence in Scotland has completely fallen apart. Labour was once tipped to take control of Scotland after their Westminster success in July, but now they're sinking fast. If the election were held today, Labour would secure just 16 seats, a crushing defeat that would see them fall even lower than their previous record-worst result in 2021. Meanwhile, the pro-independence movement is gaining momentum like never before. The SNP, ALBA, and the Greens are now on course to win 74 seats, the biggest pro-independence majority in history. That's right, the SNP might be losing a few seats, but they're still coming out on top, and more united behind independence than ever. So, what's causing Labour's collapse in Scotland? According to polling expert Sir John Curtis, there's one big reason. The worst thing that ever happened to Anas Sarwar was Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister. Labour in London is now so unpopular that it's dragging Scottish Labour down with it. SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown isn't holding back either. His response to the poll: Labour can promise plenty in an election, but they cannot deliver in government. If Labour can't be trusted in London, they can't be trusted in Edinburgh. Ouch. But he's not wrong. Starmer's government is already proving to be weak, chaotic and directionless. Scotland is noticing, and the SNP is getting ready to capitalise on it. And while Labour is dealing with border chaos and a Scottish rebellion, another major problem is brewing, this time on the global stage. Donald Trump has just imposed brutal tariffs on some of America's biggest trading partners, slapping 25% taxes on Mexico and Canada, and a 10% levy on China. And now there are growing fears that Britain could be next. These tariffs are no joke. They're already triggering fears of a global trade war, and if Trump expands them, the UK's economy could be seriously affected. Yvette Cooper was quick to respond, appearing on the BBC to warn that these tariffs could have a really damaging impact on global trade. But let's be honest, Labour has no clear plan for dealing with this situation. The US, China and the EU are all making major moves, and Keir Starmer's government is floundering. The problem is clear. Labour has no idea where to turn. They talk about closer trade ties with Europe, but at the same time, they're desperate to stay on good terms with the US. But what happens if Trump makes them choose? If Britain gets hit with tariffs, Labour will have to act fast. But so far, all they've done is offer meaningless platitudes about building better trade relationships. This is what happens when you elect a weak government. Britain is now being pushed around on the world stage, flooded with illegal migration and losing control of Scotland, all within weeks of Labour taking office. How long can this disaster continue before the British people demand real leadership? What do you think? Are Labour's weak migration policies already destroying the UK? Will Scotland break away for good? And how should Britain handle Trump's economic bombshell? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more explosive updates.